begins the climactic days of his first coming. And with every heartbeat now, the execution stake grows closer, and Passover is at hand. So Matthew 26, 1 through 5 says, "Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples, 'You know that after 2 days, the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified.' Now listen to what's about to happen. Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, 'Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people.'" So who are the ones that wanted to kill Yeshua?
The ones in authority.
The ones in authority. Exactly. The ones that had power. They didn't like him. Why didn't they want this done during the feast?
Maybe people would rebel.
They were afraid of rebellion.
Yep.
Because the people were following Yeshua. Not everybody, but there's this big climactic problem coming. Not only were these leaders fearful of the people's reactions, but they did not want more trouble with Rome. They feared that if a riot broke out during this holy day, the Romans would crack down on them even harder. So they wanted things to quiet down, and they knew that many of the supporters of Yeshua would go home once these holy days were over. So these political leaders really believe that they're in charge and that they have control of what will happen. Does that sound familiar? So how can we take comfort in knowing, though they were powerful, their plans did not prevail? The things they wanted were not going to take place. God's word always has the power. That is where we have to look for the end result. Politicians can think and say whatever they want and believe that they have control of everything. They only have the control that Yeshua gives them. Period. Period. We don't have to worry. Okay, so now prior to Passover, a woman comes to Yeshua. And he said, and this happens in Matthew 26, 6 through 13. "And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, 'Why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor.' But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, 'Why do you trouble this woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not always have. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my" what? Yes, assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel goes in the world, that what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her." In this scene, we see a group of confused and even a bit indignant disciples, as they had obviously taken the teachings of Yeshua very seriously and were concerned that this oil should have been sold to help the poor, but it was, they thought in their mind, being wasted. The question arises, how costly was this oil? In John's gospel, we're told that it's about 300 denarii. And you remember from previous studies, a denarii was 1 day's wages, right? So this one little flask of oil was almost an entire year's wages. Can you imagine pulling out your checkbook and writing a check for an entire year's wages for one little flask of perfumed oil? That's huge. So it was very costly, and we understand the concern of the disciples. Then Yeshua adds a whole new dimension to this conversation when he says, "This woman has done a mitzvah for me." And that must have stopped them in their tracks. How do you do a mitzvah for Yeshua? How do you do a mitzvah for God? It costs you, doesn't it? It always costs something to do a mitzvah for God. And in pouring this expensive oil over his feet, she was preparing him for burial. What was going through their heads? He'd told them previously that he was going to die, right? Do you think they really believed it? Do you think that it went into their skulls and their hearts that he really meant that? I don't think it did. It probably didn't penetrate.
No, but he's been teaching all along, take care of the poor.
Exactly.
Did you see me in prison? Did you visit me? Did you see the poor hungry? Did you feed them?
Exactly.
He's been telling them that.
He has, and they took it seriously. So they were indignant that this was wasteful. They could have fed so many poor with this. So, but then you got to think about, she was anointing the anointed one with oil. Messiah means the anointed one. So oil that had been crushed from the olive, and Messiah is about to be crushed. His blood spilled out to redeem us from our sins. So it's that crushing process again. And he accents her mitzvah saying that it will always be spoken of her wherever the gospel is told. And look at this. Here we are today talking about what she did. So his very words are coming to pass right now. And that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Matthew 26, 14 through 16. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went out to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver, so that from that time he sought the opportunity to betray him. Imagine all that's going on. We see Judas leaves the group and goes to the chief priest to offer his services. The woman is pouring oil on his feet and getting him ready for burial. The disciples are confused and even indignant about this happening. The leaders are all meeting to plot to kill him. And then the leaders agree and make an agreement with Judah for 30 pieces of silver, fulfilling the prophecy in Zechariah saying, Zechariah 11 through 13, "It was revoked on that day, and so the afflicted of the flock who were watching me knew that it was the word of the Lord. Then I told them, if it seems right to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them." So they weighed out my wages, 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, "Throw it to the potter, this magnificent price at which they valued me." So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of the Lord. That was in Zechariah, prophesying exactly what would happen with Judas. Yes?
Wasn't he the keeper of the money?
Yes.
How was he able to keep what was given from the chief priest of the 30 pieces of silver and the
Well, it was a separate transaction.
yeah.
It was separate. And now we go back to the group and prepare for the Seder meal with Yeshua, and he will address Judas at this meal. Matthew 26, 17 through 26. Now on that first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying to him, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples." Okay, so I want you to imagine this. Imagine that at this Passover table, the story of the redemption of Israel from Egypt is being told, including the part with the Passover lamb, and they're sitting at the table with the Passover lamb. Do you think they have any idea? Can you imagine that? So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now as they were eating, he said, "Assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and each of them began to say to him, "Lord, is it I?" He answered and said, "He who dipped his hand, and I really want you to start noticing this word hand. He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes, just as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered and said, Rabbi, is it I? He said to him, you've said it. So something very interesting is the root of the name Judas, which you see here, Yehuda. Judas starts with a yud. Yud, it always means hand, right? Look at what he's doing with his hand is going to bring woe. Woe is impending doom or judgment. But look at the difference. Yeshua starts with a yud also. Look what he's going to do with his hand. His hand is going to bring resurrection, life from the dead. The difference of what we do with our hands will either bring destruction or resurrection life. It's so huge, and we all have the choice. So watch this word hand being used over and over. When Yeshua used the word woe, it is as though he's pronouncing judgment as those taking place in Revelation. Woe can be describing impending doom, and now Judas' hand is forever attached. Judas's hand is forever attached to impending judgment. This connects us back to Genesis 4:11, and it says, and now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy what? Yeah. Does this not describe what Judas has just done? And Psalm 41:9, even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. And there again, we see the scene described. And now Yeshua describes more betrayal coming, Matthew 26:31 through 35. Then Jesus told them, this very night you are all going to fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, what's he telling them?
He's going to rise from the dead.
But if you're going to rise, what do you have to do first? Die. He's telling them now in a positive way. After I've risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, so he was getting it, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. So what do we learn from the above verses about our own strength to stay faithful to the Lord?
Our own strength, it isn't going to cut it.
Our own strength isn't going to cut it. Who do we have to depend on? We have to depend on him. He's the one that makes us strong. Nobody else. Our own desires, our own intentions are a good beginning, but we have to have a love that is unending, and then and depend on his strength to get us through these times. Okay, it is astounding to realize that even the betrayal of Peter and the others is fulfilling prophecy, as we are told in Zechariah 13:7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Didn't Yeshua just say the same words? And I will turn my hand against the little ones. And I want you to look at this word, little ones. It's za'ar in Hebrew. And what do we think of when we think of little ones? We think of little kids, right? And so Yeshua is looking at them fondly in a almost protective kind of way when he says little ones. And what is he saying to them? Little ones are going to become significant. Are little ones significant? Not really in their works and the things that they can do. But he's telling them by using this word that they are not understanding, that they're going to become significant, that there is going to be a process now that's going to unfold. And it's going to be a tough process because now they're going to betray him. They're going to see him crucified. They're going to see him die, be buried. So this is a tough process they're going through. Has anybody gone through a tough process like this? But then they're going to see the resurrection. And then things are going to turn around, right? Then they're going to start becoming significant because they're going to see the truth now. They're going to see the power. They're going to see the faithfulness and the absolute sureness of his word in their lives. And they're going to become different people. Okay, they're going to learn and grow from this experience. But for now, they have, even hearing his words, after I have risen, his death is not final. The battle is not finished. There will be complete victory. The disciples were going to go through this process. Even victory over death was a process, right? Yeshua had to go through that process too, and we're going to see that he is going to proclaim a new kind of victory too in a minute. When you feel that you're in a battle of some kind and you are losing, how would Yeshua's words, "After I have risen," help you? There's hope. There's resurrection power, and it lives in us. How does the resurrection affect us? That's what we have to be thinking. How is it affecting us, really, in our lives, in our battles, in our problems? It needs to be affecting us. And now he marches to the Garden of Gethsemane, Matthew 26, 36 through 39. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." Those are pretty amazing words coming out of the mouth of Yeshua. "Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." And I really want you to remember these words of Yeshua, starting with "my Father." Think about that word Father, because we're going to end this lesson with it, and it's huge. Okay, incredibly, though Yeshua's sadness has put him at the point of death, his greatest desire is to do the will of his Father, and he knows the will of his Father is for him to die. What does it take to get this kind of willingness to die if it's God's will?
Trust.
What does it take? Trust. Yeah, absolute. What cup is Yeshua referring to? Look what Isaiah 51:17 says. "Awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, you who have drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. You have drunk the dregs of the cup of trembling and drained it out." So clear to the last drop, he's drunk it. The dregs are the sludge of waste that sinks to the bottom of the cup. Psalm 75, 8 and 10 says, "For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup, and the wine is red. It is full, mixed, and he pours it out. Surely it's" what? "Dregs shall all the wicked of the earth drain and drink down. All the horns of the wicked will also cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be exalted." So on that execution stake, Yeshua is going to take on himself the worst sins, the sludge and the dregs, because they were in that cup that he had to drink. That he was asking his Father, "If this is possible, take this cup away from me." And the Father said, "No, it's not possible. You're going to take the worst dregs upon you on that cross." So Isaiah 53:5 says, "But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed." And 3 times Yeshua returns to find the disciples sleeping when they're supposed to be praying. That ever happened to anybody in this room? And he asked if they could not watch with him for 1 hour.
Interesting, 3.
3 again, yes. And finally he says in Matthew 26:45, then he came to his disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is where? At hand. Notice all the times hand is used, and remember the root of Judas's name is hand. Also, he's telling what is going to happen. If he knows exactly what's going to happen, who is he? He's God. He's God. Matthew 26:47 through 56. And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They'd been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor Judas had given them a pre-arranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. So Judas came straight to Jesus. Greetings, Rabbi, he exclaimed, and gave him a kiss. Jesus said, my friend, go ahead and do what you have come for. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. Put away your sword, Jesus told him. Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what must happen now? What was his main concern? Fulfilling the scripture. Oh my goodness. Is that encouraging or what? That is encouraging. Just let those words ring in your head for a minute. Then Jesus said to the crowd, am I a dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? Oh, what a great question. I was there teaching every day, he said. But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures. At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled. And there it's fulfilled. This is all happening in a place called Gethsemane. Remember Gethsemane, meaning oil press? Yeshua is being pressed on all sides. He's betrayed. His disciples fall asleep. They don't even stay awake to pray and watch with him. He is overwhelmed to the point of death. Then they all flee when he's arrested. No one is supporting him. He is being crushed on all sides, even before the cross. So again, we are reminded of Zechariah 13:7, which says, awake, sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is close to me, declares the Lord Almighty. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered, and I will turn my hand against the little ones. So now that verse has a lot more meaning after you know what that means, the little ones, and all of the things that had to happen. Yes?
The little ones
Are the disciples at this
elders
point.
and the elders
No,
and
the
scribes?
chief priests and the scribes are the rulers that are causing these things to happen. They're in cahoots with Judas.
Okay.
So the little ones being talked about are the disciples or the followers of the Lord that are scattered now.
Okay.
When they strike the shepherd, the sheep will scatter. So they're the sheep, okay? And now we turn to the legal trial of Messiah. And it's really important to know that there are going to be 2 trials going on here, okay? So this is the first one. And those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how this trial was 100% illegal according to their law. It's going to be astonishing. So pay attention to what's happening here. Okay, they wanted to put him to death, but they couldn't even find people to lie about him. Okay, they were trying. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last, 2 false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." What was he talking about? What temple? His body. Okay, and the high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, "I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you," now listen to this and watch the word that he uses. "I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at" where? "The right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Whoa. Now that's going to get their attention. There's that hand again, right? Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He's spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look now, you've heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered and said, "He is deserving of death." Then they spit in his face and beat him. And others struck him with palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ. Who's the one who struck you?" Whew. Yeshua is enduring now 2 distinct trials. One from the Jewish authorities, which we just read about, and the next will be by the Romans. But there's one really super important thing to keep in mind, and that is that when Rome ruled a place, they took over the decisions of life and death penalty trials. The Jewish authorities did not have the prerogative of carrying out a death penalty. So why were they having this trial for a death penalty? Number one question. Even though the Jewish authorities cried out for death, they were in no position to follow through with this sentence. Also, this trial did not follow the established procedures for a true trial of capital offenses, which we read in Tractate Sanhedrin 4:1. They hold the trial during the daytime. Was this daytime? No, this was night. And the verdict must also be reached during the daytime, right? This was night. A verdict of acquittal may be reached on the same day, but a verdict of conviction not until the following day. Therefore, trials may not be held on the eve of the Sabbath or on the eve of a festival day. Is this the eve of a festival day? Mm-hmm. Yes. Every single portion of this trial is illegal according to their own rules for trials. So keep that in mind. Obviously, this is conducted at night. The following day is Passover. Nothing is legal about it. All right, not to mention they wanted false witnesses. Mm-hmm. When the high priest demanded an answer from Yeshua, we again see the word hand being used as he said, "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." The right hand denotes power and strength and honor. Yeshua is telling them that he will be sitting in the most honored seat of power right next to God Most High. So can you imagine why they were going crazy? They didn't want to hear these words, and things got out of control. Now, Matthew 26:67, then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Messiah, who is the one who struck you?" Again, we see the circumstances and Yeshua's reactions to those circumstances fulfilling prophecy. Isaiah 55:6 says, "The Lord God has opened my ears, and I have not been rebellious, nor have I turned back. I offered my back to those who struck me, and my cheeks to those who tore out my beard. I did not hide my face from scorn and spittle. And here we see it happening live. That's out of Isaiah. So, and then Yeshua is handed over to Pontius Pilate, and now the Roman trial begins. Matthew 27, 1 and on. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conspired against Jesus to put him to death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now here's something that you may not know about Pilate. He had a reputation for being extremely wicked and having an iron fist. You did not question Pilate. So the historian Josephus gives the following account in which his extreme wickedness and iron fist are shown, as he writes. Pilate once pilfered funds from the Jerusalem treasury in order to fund one of his aqueduct projects. Sound familiar? When there was a strong protest against this injustice, Pilate ordered hundreds of his troops to dress as civilians and infiltrate the Jewish crowd. Hidden under their garb were clubs, and when the signal was given, many Jews were brutally beaten to death. Yeah. So Pilate wanted them to know, you don't question me. I will do what I will do. Because they didn't know. There was nothing kosher about his way of ruling. Acts 4:27 gives us a few details. For truly against your holy servant Jesus, whom you, speaking to the people, anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. So what's he saying? The whole world came against him. There wasn't a group that was left out. They were all there. The trial before Pilate, Matthew 27, 11 through 26. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they're bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. And listen to this carefully. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. His name was Yeshua Barabbas, okay? So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Yeshua Barabbas or Yeshua, who is called the Messiah?" For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Yeshua over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message saying, "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who's called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. Why do you think he was being a little bit merciful?
Because of his wife.
Because of his wife. she gave him warning. Okay, but they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water, washed his hands in front of the crowd, I'm innocent of this man's blood, he said. It's your responsibility. All the people answered, his blood is on us and our children. Ooh, oh, terrible words. Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Now, we're going to end with looking at this word Barabbas, and it's going to take us right back to Yeshua. It's an amazing name. Bar, the first 3 letters of Barabbas, is the Aramaic word for son, okay? And Barabbas, Abba is Aramaic word for father or daddy. That's what we're told always when we say Abba, oh, he's my daddy. But there is an account of a man that is told that is washing his hands in the restroom. He overheard an exchange between a Jewish father and his son. You should know that they both spoke English and Hebrew. The father said to the son in English, when I ask you to do something, I want you to call me Abba. The last part of Barabbas' name, Abba. Okay? When I ask you to do something, I want you to call me Abba. Hearing this, the man was surprised by 3 things. 1, that he was speaking in English and Hebrew in the same breath. 2, that he was using an everyday experience for child training, good for him. 3, the real meaning of Abba is not what I had been taught. Most people think Abba means daddy, but that's not quite right. Daddy doesn't have the bite or the authority to it that the true meaning of Abba has. It's personal, which is part of the meaning, but that's not the whole story. Abba doesn't just mean daddy. Abba doesn't mean dad. Abba means Father, I will obey you. Okay, now in Barabbas' name, we find this meaning. This is the son that obeys the Father, the one who is being crucified. Pretty amazing that Yeshua Barabbas would have that kind of significance. So John 6:38 says, for I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. So Barabbas' name is just setting the whole scene for Yeshua, showing us that Yeshua is the one, the Son, who is willing to obey the Father. So what does this mean to those of us sitting in this study?
You better be a Barabbas too.
We need to be a Barabbas too. Excellent. Any other comments or? Yes, it does. But unleavened bread and Passover can be used simultaneously, and it often is. So you have to keep all of that in mind. We separate it for our purposes and for clarity, and it's right, but both can be used. No, because you have to remember that the Hebrew day begins in the evening. So if it begins in the evening, they had the Passover meal, and then all of these things were happening at night. That's what made the trial illegal, because it was the day before Passover. So yeah, and so it all does fit, but it is confusing just because of the words that get used. Yeah, it is, but it all fits when you see that he was crucified on Passover. So all of this has to be going on in the night prior to the day, and then it goes through until the Passover lamb is killed at 3 in the afternoon. And it all fits because darkness was over the earth. So we get confused because of the verbiage. It's called unleavened bread the day after Passover, but really they don't eat unleavened. They eat, remember when the Jews left Egypt? It was unleavened bread that they took with them. So it's just the terminology that messes us up when we're trying to put it together. Passover was the beginning of unleavened bread because they didn't eat leaven at Passover.
It's high Sabbath already.
Pardon? And we don't eat unleavened bread at Passover, right? We don't.
Got things to do.
Constantine messed
Versus
everything
all
up.
unleavened bread and
Yes.
so forth. So the verbiage
Yes.
again gets messed up that way.
Terribly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. So it's just bad translations, unclear understanding by Christian leaders from centuries ago, and it still messes us up.
Bad Greek.
Bad understandings, yes. Okay. May you all be blessed as you serve Yeshua this week. Bye. All right, before anybody goes, next week is our final week in Matthew, if you can believe it, and we will party. So when class is over, we'll have coffee and fun stuff, and so we're looking forward to it, okay?